Welcome to a fresh week of Daily Faceoff live, streaming live on the DFO YouTube. And the show is brought to you by Fountain Tire. You and your family safety is important. Fountain Tire specializes in tire and auto service, and you don't have to settle for a good deal or good customer service because at Fountain Tire, they do both. And how about this for a good deal? Right now, you can save up to $225 on a set of 4 select tires, including Goodyear, until December 14th. Plus, save an extra $50 on any service north of $150. Some restrictions apply. Stop into Fountain Tire, make an appointment, or check out fountaintire.com. Tyler Uremchuk and not Frank Saravalli, Colby Cohen filling in today. Colb, how's it going?
It's going, man. Hockey seems like we've sort of really settled into the swing of things. You know, obviously you don't want to over or underreact after 1 or 2 games, but some teams have played 8 or 9 games already. And we are getting towards the month of November, which means we're not that far away from American Thanksgiving. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but all I'm saying here is it feels like we're starting to see who is what and really who's going to be good and who's not.
It really is crazy to see the scheduled discrepancies, if you want to call them that. Like the Devils are all the way up at 8 games played, and there's a whole bunch of teams that still only have 4. That is wild. Makes the standings look a little off too.
Well, that's why you kind of try to look at that points percentage, and you can't forget those teams started about 4 days before everybody else because they played over in that global series. And I think obviously it's going to mean at some point it seemed like the Devils is going to get a little bit of extra rest, a couple of back-to-back days off and things like that later in the year. So maybe it's best to kind of deal with the gauntlet early in the season.
Fair enough. All right. We're going to be joined by our pal Carter Hutton in about 15 minutes for a new edition of The Blue Paint. But first, let's start with the team, the only team that is still perfect on the season. A couple of groups still only have OT or shootout losses, but the Winnipeg Jets are a sparkling 5-0 to start the season. Colby, they're the only team left without any sort of a loss, and they had a really, really strong weekend. They beat up on the San Jose Sharks. They quite frankly, beat up on the Pittsburgh Penguins as well. And when I look at this, like if you would have told me, 2 weeks into the season that the Jets would be allowing 1.6 goals against per game, I would have been like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. The 4.8 goals for per game is what really jumps off the page. I know the 8 against San Jose really ballooned that number, but regardless, their power play is red hot and they're getting scoring. And heading into the year, I didn't think I liked their forward group all that much. They're proving me wrong.
Yeah, look, I thought depth scoring was going to be an issue. And even just going down the middle, you don't see necessarily tons and tons of points coming from Nemestikov, Lowry, Gustafsson down the middle. And I think that's usually where you look for strength in your roster. But, look, Nikolai Ehlers, who has, is off to a career best start, right? And you look at a guy like him who's got 7 points in 5 games. You know what you're getting from him. When he's healthy, he's a guaranteed 20 goals, right? You can look at every season. The question will be, can he get to 30 goals? He's been close, right? You look at Morrissey. Does he continue this pace? And while I don't want to sit here and say that those aren't quality wins because they're not playing against quality teams, but look, I think we know those are bottom feeder types of teams. When you watch the Winnipeg Jets, and I've made sure, because on Morning Cup of Hockey, we do have a very loyal group of Winnipeg Jets fans that will absolutely come for me if I breeze over the Winnipeg Jets. You look at the way they're managing the puck, right? And I wasn't sure how that would look with a new head coach and Scott Arniel. Although there's obviously familiarity with Scott Arniel. He's been there. And so you sometimes wonder, is it going to take a little bit of time? Are they going to push more buttons? Is he going to get the substitute teacher treatment, Tyler? Remember when you're a kid, substitute teacher comes in, it's movie day. Nobody's really listening to the substitute teacher. So I wondered how that would be. But, this team has managed the puck for 60 minutes a night better than any other team in the National Hockey League. And while you generally don't see that this early in the seasons, between Hellebuck's unbelievable numbers, his numbers have been great. This team is off to a phenomenal start.
We're going to talk goaltending in a little bit, but one thing that I do think they need to manage a little bit better this season, just when you look at the way Hellebuck's numbers have fallen off in each of the last 2 playoffs, I think they got to play Eric Comrie more. I think you need, one start in 5 games for Comrie. I especially early in the season right now, I think that could have been a 3-2 number. I think they need to work.
Unnecessary.
they need to take the workload off Hellebuck a bit this year. Really focus on, yes, regular season good, but they've been a good regular season team for a number of years. Try to prioritize setting yourself to be your best in April. Yeah. All right. Let's from one stud goalie, let's go out to another, and that would be in New York. We're talking a lot of goaltending today, even though Carter Hutton isn't coming up for a little bit. But you got Ottinger and Swayman. All these guys signed their big tickets, and there's the drama with Shesterkin, and he is to an extent putting his money where his mouth is. Colby, he has been unbelievable this season, and that continued on the weekend. He stopped 34 of 35 against the Leafs and was absolutely exceptional. Those numbers are sparkling. Igor is driving the Rangers, and he is a massive reason why I know a lot of people are getting into the sexy pick of the New Jersey Devils. If you go right now to our friends at Bet365, both the Devils and Rangers are 11-1. To me, the Rangers are still the cup favorite in that division coming out of the Metro. I look at Igor. He's so good. The production they're getting from Panarin is still insane. I think the Rangers have the best shot of winning the Stanley Cup out of the Metro. Am I crazy or am I right?
No, you're right. I think there's no way you can look at the way this Rangers team is built, look at the way that this Rangers team has started, and look at the goaltender. I mean, I will die on this hill 7 days a week. If you have the goaltender, you find a way to make it work, because there isn't a lot of these guys. And I know we have this new school and this new mentality, and our guy Frank Saravalli is one of them. They don't want to pay goaltenders. They'd rather piece it together. And here's what I say to that. That's because teams don't have them. They don't exist. There's only 5 or 6 of them in the entire National Hockey League. And Igor Shesterkin, you're seeing on a daily basis why you need to get this guy locked up for 8 years, why you cannot let him go to open market for the Vegas Golden Knights to come in and offer him $11.5 or $12 million a year in a tax-free environment where his take-home pay will be 30-40% more. You got to get this guy locked up. You cannot let him get to UFA. That game against Toronto, which I watched very closely, this was a game where Craig Berube cannot yell at his superstars and say, you're not getting to the high danger. You're not playing in between the dots. There were plenty of grade A chances. There were times when the New York Rangers were back on their heels, okay? But you know what they did? They bent and they didn't break, and it's because of the man named Igor Shesterkin. He has bet on himself. He started out as good as we've seen him start. Last year, you remember, first half of the season, Jonathan Quick had a lot of work to do. He played a lot of games. He played a lot of big games, and he kind of held it together until Igor found his game. I'll tell you what, I love watching a player bet on himself, and right now that is looking like a good bet, although it is early in the season.
Yeah, Rangers projected to have north of $29 million in cap space next year, probably close to 32, 33 by the time the cap actually increases. And I think they would be smart to just maybe kill this conversation right now and pay Igor. If his logic is, I'm the team's best player, so I want to be paid the most on the team, then give him 12. Like if he wants 12, give him 12. And who knows if that even gets the deal done right now with the way he's playing. But the Rangers and Devils both firmly atop the Metro division by points percentage. But that Rangers 900 points percentage, 4-0-1 on the season. It has been a sparkling start on Broadway for Igor and company. Let's do a new little segment we're doing this year, Colby. On Mondays, we're going to give out our weekend warrior, someone from the last couple of days around the NHL who really stood out to you. Doesn't have to be because they scored 1 million goals or just scored a highlight reel goal. It can be for any reason. So I will throw this your way. Colb, who's your weekend warrior?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a guy that a lot of people are probably not super familiar with, Cole Koepke. Okay. And you know, he played in Tampa Bay the last couple of years, but not in a full-time role. And I had to look up the exact numbers, but a couple of years ago, he played 17 games and he had 1 point. Okay. Last year, 9 games, 2 assists. He started the season out with the Boston Bruins. His minutes, you're seeing him there on the board, 10:43 a game. He's got 6 points. He's playing on the 3rd or the 4th line. He hits everything that moves. He's a north-south player. And, you know, when you have a guy like this at the bottom of your lineup, chipping in, he scores a goal against Utah the other night. I think it was the only goal for the Boston Bruins in an eventual loss. But when you start getting these types of contributions from honest, blue-collar, north-south hockey players, it can really help your team. So good for him. To me, his season and his weekend makes him my weekend warrior.
Yeah, 3 goals in 6 games, back-to-back goal or games with a goal over the weekend. You love seeing those stories of a 6th-round pick who finds a way to get to the NHL. So yeah, 6th-round pick of Tampa all the way back in 2018, and it looks like he has found a home in Boston. For me, Colb, I'm going to go with Ross Colton out in Colorado. We talked a lot about how it was only the big guns producing for the Avalanche. Well, Ross Colton, yes, he got elevated to that top line, but still, the Avalanche are looking for anything. They can't be picky right now. He's up to 6 goals in 6 games on the year after popping 4 over the weekend. But there is still the conversation now of Makar, Rantanen, and McKinnon have combined for 8 goals. Ross Colton now has 6. Outside of those 4, the rest of the roster only has 7. When you look at their line chart on Daily Faceoff, it's a whole bunch of guys that even I sit there and go, who? Wait, who? And who's that? The Avalanche have some legitimate depth concerns. Shout out to Ross Colton for an unbelievable weekend as I name him my weekend warrior and then slag on the rest of his teammates. But the Avalanche, it could get late early for them. And I know they're holding their breath because, Lehkonen could come back and Nichushkin's eventually back. And maybe one day even Gabe Landeskog returns to the lineup. But if you sit there hoping and wishing and waiting, it could be, like you said, American Thanksgiving, and you're behind the 8 ball pretty significantly.
Well, and I think with Nichushkin, he has entered, I think, step 3 of his sort of recovery. He's back on the ice in Colorado, so that's a positive step, something that you love to see because, man, he instantly changes that lineup when he gets back. I mean, he seems like a guy who stirs it up for that group. He brings you big support. He can play down the middle. He's kind of one of those do-it-all types of players, almost like Kadri was when he was in Colorado a couple of years ago. So, Ross Colton, local product, grew up not that far from me. So, got to give him some love being an Atlantic District kid. And he's just made a living on the power play. You play with those types of players, you better make it count because, he's a guy who played with some stars in Tampa Bay. He comes over to Colorado. Now he plays with a different group of stars and he's making the most of his opportunity.
Yeah, he's looked great. Let's move along one more segment until we bring in our boy Carter Hutton. But it's called The Big Surprises, Colby. And again, it is still early, but there are a couple of things developing that I think you can, kind of look at and go, okay, maybe I should have thought about this a different way coming into the year. So I want to throw this your way. 2 weeks in, is there any prediction you made before the season that you're already kind of going hand up, kind of want to take that one back?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think an easy one would have been Colorado. I really did think, they would look better even with their depth issues. And I thought Casey Middlestat would look better. And I've just continued to be a little bit unimpressed with him. But that's actually not where I went. To me, it felt a little too obvious. I thought the Buffalo Sabres would take a step forward this season. Okay. I didn't think that they would be a playoff team, but I didn't think they would be a lottery team. I certainly didn't have it on my bingo card that their captain would be, taking the knees out of a player because he was pissed off about a high stick earlier in practice, right? It seems like the dysfunction is never ending in Buffalo. I very, very much question Kevin Adams as the leader of that organization, as the general manager, the decisions he did or even didn't make this offseason. But again, I looked at their blue line, right? I go to dailyfaceoff.com. I spend some time and I look at their back end and I'm just wondering, when are we going to get a little bit more out of Owen Power? All right. I know Bowen Byram is a young player, but I'd like to see more out of Bowen Byram. What about Rasmus Dahlin? When do we see domination out of this, the new young captain, right? I just think this should be a better back end. Their goaltending last year with UPL seemed to solidify itself this year, hit or miss. Devin Levi, I think the jury's still out. Is he truly a National Hockey League goaltender? But, I didn't expect Buffalo to be a lottery team this year. After the first couple of weeks of the season, I think they're a lottery team. That's how bad I think they are.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where coming into the year, everyone's always a tinge more optimistic. And the reality is every year there's a whole bunch of disappointments. For mine, I'm going to go out west, Colb. I kind of had the Minnesota Wild as a bit of an afterthought. And I know there were some analytical models that were like, hey, they're a 100-point team this year. And I kind of scoffed at that. And I'm looking at that roster and, Their blue line is fine. Brock Faber is very, very good, but the rest of it, I just kind of shrug and go, Brodeen and Spurgeon get banged up a lot. I didn't love their depth. You look up front, kind of more of the same. I like their top six, don't like their bottom six. And I was just like, they weren't a playoff team last year, and they didn't do anything over the summer to lead me to believe they could take a step forward. And here we are. They're one of the few teams still without a regulation loss, points in all 5 games for Minnesota. Was I wrong on the Minnesota Wild, or do you still think there's maybe a falling back to earth kind of moment coming for them?
Look, I think the Minnesota Wild, if they get goaltending, are going to stay around the playoff picture all year. In our predictions, I think I had them as the first team out. I didn't think Utah would be a playoff team this year. That's a bet Johnny Laz and I made on Morning Cuppa that I hope I don't lose. But I thought that, the Wild would be ahead of the Blues, the Blackhawks, Utah. But I think we all expected the Avs and the Preds to look a little bit better too. So I do think the balance of powers will fix itself. I don't expect the Predators to go 0-82. They'll win eventually. They'll figure it out with all their superstars. So I don't know if I think you didn't give them enough credit, Tyler, but I don't, I think they're one of those bubble teams.
Yeah, and again, I would stand by wild card at best, but definitely moving off my prediction of no way they're a playoff team from the start of the season. Let's move along, get to our big segment for the day. It's the Blue Paint with Carter Hutton. Always a pleasure to welcome Carter Hutton to the show, former NHL goaltender, host of the Starting Goalie Show on Daily Faceoff. And Huts, there is no crease situation that is spicier than what is going on in Pittsburgh. Tristan Jarry was healthy scratched. You do not hear about goalies getting healthy scratched all that often. I guess kind of a two-parter here. What do you make of Jarry's struggles, and what do you make of the way Joel Blomqvist is playing in the meantime?
The young kids come in and he's played very well, for Blomqvist, 2-2, 902 save percentage. And in those losses too, losing to Toronto, Carolina, those are tough games. Like those are games you're trying to protect your young kids from being in. And for Jarry, I feel like this is a question we've always had with this guy, right? There's times where it's just, he's been solid and had good numbers, but in his last 17, he's lost 11 of them. And those 6, I have the numbers here, 6 of those games the Pens have scored in his wins, they've scored 5.7. So this team protects them with offense. And at times, it's just been a struggle here. I think it needs to be a change of scenery at this point. And I know you can't ride Blomqvist by any means, but Ned didn't fare too well in his last start. He's just coming back. So maybe if you can get him a little more spotted starts, but something's got to change at Pittsburgh here because it's getting old.
Well, let's stay in the East, Carter, and I'll ask you about another goalie controversy. I can't believe we're using those words this early in the season, but hey, that's what we do. That's why we have things to talk about. But let's go to Detroit. All right. What is going on with the goaltending situation? And do they have somebody that is capable of getting them into the next phase of the Yzer plan? Because I'm starting to wonder about this plan and just how many years this plan is going to take.
No, I agree, Colby. This is a tough one, right? And I'm a big fan of Talbot. I'm a big fan of Alex Lyon, but these are not the guys that are going to bring you to the promised round. This is a great platoon of goalies. These are guys that are just, Talbot had his time where he carried the team and he's played well. And Alex Lyon he's been doing this year after year, but we know he's not a guy to bring you a promised land. Obviously, the signing of Ville Husso is a killer right now. You look at him, he gets one game, then he gets sent down, put on waivers. Jack Campbell is in the program. Who knows what he's dealing with? But for the Red Wings, they need to find a guy and they need to find a goalie fast because I think at this point, the way this team is built, it's just not going as planned. And I think you can ride the platoon of Alex Lyon and Cam Talbot, but I just don't think this is a team that's going to get you to the playoffs. Or if they do get in, they're not going to make any noise with these two.
All right, well, let's move around to the West for a minute, and let's look at Askarov. He's 2 shutouts for, the San Jose Barracuda, which I'm pumped about. Johnny McCarthy, their head coach, former teammate of mine. But should he be done with the American League? You rarely ever hear a general manager or a hockey management type of person say there's a such thing as too much seasoning in the minors. But with a guy like him, is it time to just let him come up and see if he can help this San Jose team that does look like they're a little bit of a mess defensively?
Yeah, that's the biggest question mark here, right? In those shutouts, 22 saves, 26, not as busy as he's going to be when it comes to San Jose. But at this point, the Sharks are 0-4-2, right? They don't even have a win in regulation. So this is where I think giving him the chance, especially with his demeanor, right? This is a guy that has almost the arrogance, right? You see him win games. He's shutting the net down. And Blackwood hasn't been great. 875 save percentage. Vanacek, 884. And these are goalies that I believe can carry the luggage, but at the same time, this San Jose team needs a spark, and maybe this is the guy. And at some point, I think you need to bet on him. And if you want him to try to grow, even if you get him up and get him in a few games and it doesn't go well, you can always send him back. But I think at this point, there's really no harm in trying.
Just to follow up on San Jose, you mentioned Vanacek and Blackwood. Their numbers are not good, but again, it's San Jose. If you were a contending team, let's look at Colorado. I don't think Pittsburgh wants to add another name to the mix, but again, they're a team with goalie problems right now. If you were a contending team who, for whatever reason, started to go look to bring in a goalie, would either of Vanacek or Blackwood interest you? Could either of them be good on a better team?
Yeah, Blackwood's the guy for me. I think Blackwood has a huge upside, right? I'm a little biased. He's a Thunder Bay boy where I'm from, but this is a guy that's a big body and he hasn't really played in a protected system. So he is a guy that I think has a lot of leverage and he could be moved out. And Vanacek fits as a good 1B. He can be a backup. He can play decent minutes. So I think he would be the guy that San Jose would want to keep, where maybe you can move Blackwood on. Maybe you talk about Pittsburgh. Maybe you talk about Colorado. Where could he end up? I think that's a move that would make sense. I think they were hoping Blackwood would grow into more of a number one guy there. But I just think the way San Jose defends, and I have it here, 153 chances against in these 6 games, and the league average is 122. So think how many extra scoring chances they're giving up 5-on-5 that these goalies are getting exposed to. So Askarov is going to get a rude awakening when he gets to the NHL, but he's got the skill set to hopefully, get it done.
Yeah, Blackwood, again, after those first couple of years in New Jersey, the future just looked so promising, and then the wheels kind of came off for a bit. I know he dealt with injuries as well, but goalies never really develop in a straight line, and that's certainly the case for Anthony Stolarz. I wanted to wrap there. I mean, you look at his career, stops in Philly, Edmonton, Anaheim, before really putting it together in Florida, gets the big money deal in Toronto. He is off to a good start, but he's never played more than 28 times in a season, Huts. I know Joe Woll is dealing with the injuries right now, but when you look at Stolarz, when you look at the amount Toronto paid him as well, is he a guy who at 30 years old can handle his first 45-plus start season, or do you think he's just better in that 1B? Do you think he can rise to the occasion?
This is similar to me. I played, I think my last year in St. Louis, I played 35 games, had a big year, similar what went on with him. And then I got moved on and I ended up really struggling playing all the time, right? The physical demand. But for Stolarz at his age, you never know, right? These are the unknowns. And I think with Joseph Woll, and I also think with Anthony Stolarz, why he went to Toronto is knowing the situation with Woll and where he was at, that there was this potential for this, right? There was a potential for injury. There was a potential for him when he got the keys to the castle, he's going to struggle with it. And he's been great so far. Even last game, losing to the Rangers, he played very well in that game. The one goal was a backdoor tap in by Kreider. The other one, Lafreniere made a great shot on that play. And in his other loss in Montreal, he arguably was the best player on the rink. They lost 1-0. And in his 2 losses, they only have 1 goal for. So this guy's been rock solid for them. Again, I don't know if the Leafs, this is a tough draw. They got Vasilevsky tonight. They just had Shesterkin. They got the Russians coming to town. So I think for Stolarz, this is going to be a big game because it's a back-to-back. And tomorrow, hopefully, Joseph Woll gets back in the pipe. So it's going to be great here for the Leafs.
Yeah, it's one of the few times, I actually think one of the only times he's had to play 4 straight games in his NHL career, which is crazy. Huts, always appreciate the insight. Carter Hutton, you can find him with the Starting Goalie Show on Daily Faceoff. Appreciate your time, man.
Thanks, guys.
Let's move along to our hashtag AskDFO inbox question, Colby. Let's start with one that we got in the chat. It comes from a Blues fan, J-Rock. Broberg and Holloway playing well. They are off to great starts. Broberg has 6 points already with the St. Louis Blues. He says, does it make the likelihood of offer sheets being more common if their success continues? And I'll just say off the jump, I think yes. I mean, when you look at the way for example, the Jesperi Kotkaniemi thing kind of blew up in Carolina's face to an extent, I could see GMs looking at that and being like, oh, maybe I don't take the plunge on a young guy. But if St. Louis ends up getting, striking gold with Broberg and Holloway, which they may have, I think it will lead other GMs to go, yeah, I don't mind burning a bridge here if I'm getting 2 good young players.
I think this was so unique because you had a team that had cap issues, okay, and you pretty much knew they weren't going to match one or both. And, they weren't massive deals. You weren't giving up 4 or 5 first-round picks for these types of offer sheets. When you look at the return on these picks, based on the salary numbers, like, to me, they were very fair. I look at these 2 players and I look at what Edmonton got and I'm like, you're really not giving up anything crazy. to get these two players, like, are you going to go out and draft guys in the second round that are going to do what Broberg and Holloway have done? You're not going to have to spend time developing them. You're not going to have to fly around and watch them play their amateur hockey at Wisconsin or UMass, I believe, is where Broberg came from. So I think when you add all those factors in, this specific situation made a lot of sense. Tyler, I hope you're right, because I hope we have offer sheets every offseason till the end of time. I don't think you are, though. I think we still live in this world where these guys are too afraid to do it to each other. They don't know when they're going to need to pick up the phone. It's definitely an old boys thing. So I would love to be wrong here, Tyler, but history of this stuff tells me these are still going to be few and far between.
I got a second one, a little bonus one for you. We had a story go up at dailyfaceoff.com from Hunter Crowther, and it's titled, "It's Time to Say It, Anze Kopitar is better than Patrice Bergeron." Are you buying or selling on that?
I'm not buying that for 2 seconds based on the bias nature of this question. Patrice Bergeron was a teammate of mine. I've seen what it looks like when he leads you to a Stanley Cup final. Look, the numbers are really, really close. Obviously, the assists are a little bit different. I don't know. That plus minus situation there, when I looked it up and I looked at the career plus minus for Patrice Bergeron, he's a plus 289 in his career. And Anze Kopitar is only a plus 98 in his career. And I know plus minus isn't everything, right? But to me, Patrice Bergeron, 170 games played versus a guy who played 98 playoff games. I know one has 2 cups, Look, to me, Patrice Bergeron sits on the mantle by himself. Whether I'm making sense or not, I'm sticking to it.
Let's move along to our daily bets, brought to you by Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. You can download the app and use the promo code DAILY365, all one word, to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. One game tonight, Tampa, Toronto, and I got one shot prop parlay. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, 2+. He's been hammering this in every single game. He's getting the power play time. I think this is a great spot. And Victor Hedman, 3+. He's hit it in back-to-back games. He's up to, I think, 14 shots in 4 games this year. So I like Hedman. I like OEL. Play him together with the same game parlay tool, and it is plus 225. Wrapping up the show with garbage time. Colby, where is Rutger? That was the chant in Winnipeg. Pat, do we have the video? Can we take a listen?
Pedersen for Puljujärvi. That's deflected back down ice. Comrie will slow it down as both teams change in front of him. There's Sandberg. Off to Barron.
Colby, what do you make of the Jets fans getting over Rutger, even though he's not in the country or the building or even with the Penguins?
Listen, I love it. You know what I mean? This makes sports great, and we've had Rutger on Morning Cup of Hockey. I've known Rutger since I played for his dad when I was 4 years old. So you'd be hard pressed to find someone who's a bigger fan of Rutger McGroarty than I am, maybe his parents, right? So, but I still love this. You know what? He made a decision. Now he's going to live with the choices, right? And you burn a franchise and you don't want to sign there, whatever the reasons may be, you're going to have to deal with the ridicule that comes of it. And I love that the Winnipeg Jets fans did it. I think that Rutger, probably watching this video, loves it too. He's that type of kid. You remember from the World Juniors, the discourse between them and the fans, I think in Finland or Sweden, I don't remember exactly where it was a couple of years ago, but to me, this is a moment that makes sports great. I think it's light. I think it's fun. It doesn't seem hateful. And I think the Winnipeg Jets, kudos to them for doing this. And again, they're talking about a guy who I absolutely love, but let's call a spade a spade. It's a fun moment, right? It's a fun moment.
Yeah, I mean, if you take it too seriously, there's a lot of stuff in sports that wouldn't be fun. And you're right, he's got to deal with the consequences. So a crowd is chanting and jeering him a little bit. Again, he wasn't even there. So I thought people making a stink about it were being a little ridiculous. That is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Colby, appreciate you popping in. You can find Colby Cohen every Monday through Thursday with Morning Cup of Hockey on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, he and Johnny Lazarus. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any episodes of that either. But everybody, hope you have a good Monday. We'll be back tomorrow at noon Eastern. See you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.